example of the necessity of international cooperation. Even the great strides of development we have made over the past 4 years have been facilitated by strong international cooperation. Whether it be the 4 road corridors and hundreds of secondary schools we are constructing through our cooperation with the United States, or the M1 road we are rehabilitating and expanding through our cooperation with the European Union, or the railway line system we have revived for the first time in 40 years through our cooperation with China, or the orthopedic and neurosurgery hospital we have developed through the cooperation with Norway, or the Makanjira Road we are ready to develop through our cooperation with Saudi Arabia, or the investments we are making to strengthen education and governance institutions through our cooperation with the United Kingdom, or the solar power plants that we have developed through our cooperation with Japan, or the extended credit facility from the International Monetary Fund that has unlocked access to the World Bank's and IDEA support through cooperation with developing partners, or the life-saving food assistance we mobilized for the people of Mangochi following the impact of Tropical Storm Anna through the cooperation with Iceland, or implementation of social protection programs to help rural women enjoy economic empowerment through our cooperation with Ireland, or the procurement of emergency food, fertilizers, and climate-resilient seeds for climate-ravaged Malawian communities through our cooperation with Tanzania, Ukraine, Egypt, Iceland, Russia, Morocco, and many others. Malawi is a testament to the power of cooperation to move a nation's development forward into an inclusively wealthy and sustainable future that is brighter than the past. It is, in fact, this foundation of international cooperation that we have built on to actively engage in intergovernmental negotiations for the pact of the future, for the future that we have fully endorsed at this 79th session of the General Assembly. It is also this foundation of international cooperation that we have built on to host 80 international organizations and institutions for our 2nd annual Malawi Partners Conference right here in New York to get investor alignment to our ATM strategy of boosting productivity and value addition in the sectors of agriculture, tourism, and mining that hold the greatest promise for Malawi's economic transformation. If the future belongs to nations that know how to leverage the power of international cooperation, then the future belongs to Malawi. If the future belongs to nations with an apologetic commitment to multilateral collaboration, then the future belongs to Malawi. If the future belongs to nations that are driven by moral conviction to uphold the values of servant leadership, shared prosperity, ending corruption, and the rule of law, then the future belongs to Malawi. If the future belongs to nations that have adopted a no retreat and no surrender attitude towards the achievement of SDGs by 2030, then the future belongs to Malawi. If the future belongs to nations that put its children first, then the way that Malawi has done, by resolving to end child marriages and poisoning of children with lead products by 2030, that future belongs to Malawi. But, Mr. President, our efforts to move toward, in the 5th gear, toward these goals are being significantly slowed down by a global system of multilateral agencies and financial institutions that are too slow, too inefficient, too monolithic, and too undemocratic for the kind of speedy and tailor-made interventions that we need. As a result of our refusal to practice the democracy of equal representation here in the UN, our calls for member states to practice democracy in their jurisdictions are beginning to fall on deaf ears. As a result of our refusal to honor climate financing pledges or link them to debt relief, the debt to GDP ratios in developing countries like Malawi are growing at alarming rates, posing a significant threat to global financial stability. If this is not fixed, those who keep us in a state of perpetual debt, when they have the resources to cancel those debts, should make no mistake, the spreading debt crisis in the developing world is a cancer that will make your own economies unsafe. So the time to fix this is now. Mr. President, I said that the second dimension of international relations is competition. And again, in this area, we all can and must do better. There is nothing wrong with healthy competition between nations because competition fuels innovation, improves quality, and multiplies options for citizens, which is the essence of freedom. But as we have done in global sports, we must make competition between nations fair by regularly reviewing and revising the rules on which our international system is based, to ensure that the way nations compete and what they compete for is not rigged to disenfranchise some countries as we compete for natural resources, international markets, financial support, and the new technologies, which are currently skewed against the global South. Even with the era of artificial intelligence being fully upon us, I worry that the rules for regulating this arena are already being written to empower some nations and give them unfair advantages over others. We need more than a rules-based system. We also need the rules themselves to foster fair competition. Of course, what this means is that we need stronger governance institutions that can enforce fair rules for accessing education, markets, technology, financing, and natural resources. It is therefore my central contention, Mr. President, that the one place we must have strong governance is here. If governance is weak here, there will be no one to regulate the collaboration and competition between nations in an equitable manner. And it is this absence of equity that is at the root of unwinnable conflicts in Eastern Europe, in Palestine, in Eastern DRC, and counting. We need governance reform to make the United Nations stronger because the world needs a strong UN that can be good and peaceful, not a weak UN that can only be harmless. And we need it now. Thank you for your attention.
En nombre de las
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Malawi and Commander-in-Chief of the Malawi Defense Force.
La Asamblea.
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency William Samoei Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya and Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces. I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
Your Excellency, President of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly, Ambassador Philemon Yang, United Nations Secretary General Mr. Antonio Guterres, Excellencies, heads of state and government, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I congratulate you, Ambassador Philemon Yang, on your well-deserved election as President of this session of the General Assembly. Mr. President, I welcome the choice of your theme, Unity in Diversity for the Advancement of Peace, Sustainable Development, and Human Dignity for Everyone, Everywhere, which resonates with the core principles of the 2030 Agenda and aligns closely with the core values and mission of the United Nations. Excellencies, the world is at a challenging moment and in a most precarious international security dispensation. The promise of the United Nations Charter to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war has been profoundly shaken. From land to sea, and from air to the outer space, global peace, security, and stability are increasingly under threat. Conflicts and tensions pervade every frontier, undermining the collective security that international cooperation seeks to uphold. Cases of polarizing narratives, factionalism, social upheavals, organized crime, war, and stockpiling of weapons of mass destruction are at an all-time high. Great power rivalry is intensifying, provoking regional competition and inducing geopolitical and geoeconomic realignments and tensions. The subtle nuances of them versus us has produced negative coalitions, wars, tensions, as well as eroded trust and confidence in global multilateral system. From Gaza to Darfur, Ukraine, Yemen, Eastern DRC, the Sudan, the Sahel, and the criminality in Haiti, conflict is inflicting a trail of destruction of life and livelihoods in historic proportions. These conflicts have become battlegrounds for armed factions, external interventions, and proxy wars, resulting in unprecedented anarchic situations and long-lasting negative repercussions on global stability and economic development. The world cannot realize durable peace, security, and shared prosperity when emphasis is being put on what divides rather than what brings us together. We must therefore promote approaches that support positive competition for all. The perilous security landscape is further complicated by emerging threats stemming from human advancement. Cybersecurity threats and sophisticated cyber attacks on critical infrastructure pose significant risks to national security and global stability. Furthermore, the proliferation of advanced technologies such as artificial intelligence in the military domain and autonomous weapons systems has introduced new challenges for arms control and international regulation. Regrettably, the world's most powerful states have increasingly chosen unilateralism and militarization over dialogue and diplomacy. As a consequence, the capacity of our multilateral institutions to maintain and enforce peace, even in national crises with significant regional impacts, is severely undermined. Even worse, a resurgence of nuclear arms race, buoyed by the intensifying geopolitical rivalries and tensions, has made the possibility of a catastrophic nuclear warfare a real possibility. Our vision of a world free from nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction is dying incrementally. We must not sit back and leave the future of upcoming generations to fate. We must intentionally rise to the occasion to meet the challenges of our time by reaffirming the core values of the UN Charter. We need to muster the political will and collectively reinforce our diplomatic efforts to confront the security threats through comprehensive, multi-pronged, and context-specific approaches. Excellencies, Kenya's commitment to international peace and security is unwavering. We continue investing in efforts that promote stability and harmony both within our region and beyond. We are committed to continuing to mediate, facilitate, and support peace initiatives and processes in our region, contributing to regional peace operations and the UN peacekeeping missions. Through our participation in the Africa Union Transition Mission in Somalia, we have stood side by side with our sisterly neighbor, Somalia, in their fight against Al-Shabaab. We are proud that Somalia will soon take up a seat as a non-permanent member of the Security Council, underscoring the tremendous progress achieved in consolidating peace and stability in that country. The UN must, however, continue to support Somalia in forging an agreement on the post-2024 security support. Kenya welcomes the adoption of the Security Council Resolution 2719, establishing a framework for financing Africa Union peace support operations through UN-assessed contributions, thereby enhancing our collective peacekeeping efforts. A well-funded AU peace operation are not only an African priority, but a global good, considering the complexity and interconnected nature of emerging threats to international peace and security. Earlier this year, under the request of the leadership of South Sudan, I launched the All-Inclusive Tumaini Initiative, bringing together the warring parties and the political leadership of South Sudan to address the root causes of the protracted conflict in that country. I commend the leadership of South Sudan and all the participating parties for their commitment to the peace process. I also thank all regional and international partners for their unwavering support, both political and financial, to the South Sudan Tumaini Initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, at the last General Assembly, I announced Kenya's readiness to lead a multinational security support mission to Haiti at the Haitian government's request. Following the Security Council's authorization under Resolution 2699, Kenya has deployed 382 specially trained police officers to Haiti. Just a few days ago, I had the opportunity to visit Haiti, witness the work of our officers in the field, and observe remarkable progress on the ground. Our support for the Haitian National Police has significantly advanced the pacification of cities and towns, protected critical infrastructure, and relieved many communities previously held captive by criminal gangs. I also commend Haiti's political leadership for forging an agreement and a promising roadmap towards free, fair, and democratic elections. We are deeply grateful for the financial and logistical support from the United States, Canada, and other member states that are shouldering this heavy burden. This has been critical to the MSS's deployment thus far. However, Kenya and other Caribbean and African countries are ready to deploy, but are hindered by insufficient equipment, logistics, by providing necessary support, either directly to MSS contributing countries or through the UN Trust Fund. I must emphasize, however, that Kenya will deploy the additional contingent towards attaining the target of all the 2,500 police officers by January next year. The progress so far in Haiti demonstrates that what was once deemed mission impossible is indeed a present and undeniable possibility. Mr. President, we must candidly acknowledge that international cooperation in its current form has clear limitations. It is constrained by entrenched systems and structures that prevent effective action and meaningful progress. Since the last General Assembly, the global situation has deteriorated across multiple fronts. Conflicts have deepened, economic disparities have widened, and the climate crisis has intensified. To address these challenges, we must rethink and reform global collaboration mechanisms, making them much more responsive, adaptable, and impactful. The existing international security architecture, represented by the UN Security Council, continues to hamper efforts to maintain international peace and security. The Council is, by all intents and purposes, dysfunctional, undemocratic, non-inclusive, unaccountable, autocratic, and at best, opaque. An institution that excludes 54 African countries with 1.4 billion people, while allowing one nation to veto decisions of the remaining 193 member states in the 21st century, is simply unacceptable. We must urgently seek to make the Security Council representative, inclusive, transparent, democratic, effective, and accountable. In Africa, we are not advocating for reform and collective action solely at the UN. In fact, we are also in the process of comprehensively reforming the Africa Union to become a fit-for-purpose institution that can effectively represent African nations globally and deliver prosperity. Excellencies, peace and development are inseparable pillars. One cannot flourish without the other. Yet, the 2024 Sustainable Development Goals report paints a bleak picture. Only 17% of targets are on track. Nearly half show minimal or moderate progress, and over 1/3 have stalled or regressed. The COVID-19 pandemic, escalating conflicts, geopolitical tensions, and climate change have severely impacted progress towards the SDGs and the Paris Agreement goals. Inadequate and unsustainable means of implementation, particularly in financing, technical support, and capacity building, continue to obstruct our efforts to realize the 2030 agenda. Biased methodologies employed by credit rating agencies further disadvantage African countries, making it more difficult to access affordable financing from international capital markets. Additionally, unilateral economic, financial, and trade measures not only impede the full achievement of economic and social development, but also undermine the principles of international cooperation, mutual respect, and sovereignty. Let us pause and reflect on the true significance of this predicament. Many countries in the global south are forced to choose between buying medicine and hospital equipment or paying their debt obligations, and between buying textbooks for school-going children or paying their debt obligations. They are forced to choose between hiring teachers and making sure that there is equipment in schools or paying their debt. I can go on and on. This is not an abstract illustration detached from daily reality, but the normal experience of millions of ordinary people. One must wonder what goes on in the minds of those who prioritize economic returns over people. Ladies and gentlemen, what really happened to humanity? Addressing these deep-rooted challenges requires transformative changes to build a more equitable and resilient global framework. We have outlined many of these solutions in the Pact of the Future, demonstrating our clear understanding of what needs to be done. However, we have yet to master the political will necessary to turn these commitments into action. It is a fundamental principle of development that no nation can achieve lasting prosperity if its neighbors remain impoverished. Our economies are interconnected, and the well-being of one directly impacts the other. We must ensure that developing countries have the necessary foundations to claim their rightful place in the 21st century global economy. This is not just a moral and fair imperative. It is a strategic necessity to address systemic challenges such as migration, labor market disparities, climate change, and global security. Strengthening these foundations requires reforming the international financial architecture, facilitating debt relief, concessional long-term at-scale financing, grants, and de-risking lending instruments is essential to increasing investment to develop vital infrastructure and expand critical sectors. Consider Africa's immense untapped potential in clean energy resources. Harnessing this potential is critical not only for the continent's economic growth and social resilience, but also for global priorities like accelerating the energy transition, combating climate change, and diversifying supply chains. Energy-hungry industries such as data centers, mineral processing, and manufacturing are seeking clean and affordable sources which Africa can provide in abundance. Yet, out of the 500 gigawatts of renewable energy added to the global mix in 2023, Africa accounted for less than 3 gigawatts. How is this possible, given the continent's vast natural resources, skilled workforce, and massive energy needs? We cannot allow Africa to be left behind this time round. Affordable financing is essential, but so are transformative policies and inclusive fair trade practices, market access, inclusive international tax cooperation, technology transfer, and capacity building. This is why, at COP28, we launched the Africa Green Industrialization Initiative, aimed at unlocking investments for the continent's immense opportunities. This Pan-African initiative promotes large-scale, high-impact, and bankable green industrial and infrastructure projects. Next month, in Nairobi, we will host an investment forum for the Accelerated Partnership for Renewables in Energy to attract investments for the untapped potential in solar, wind, geothermal, and hydropower. Globally, we also need to improve the tools we already have. The SDG Stimulus Fund, initiated by the Secretary General in 2023, requires our joint support to succeed, including from multilateral development banks. Similarly, replenishing the International Development Association, IDA, is essential to provide concessional loans to the world's poorest nations. Earlier this year, I hosted the IDA 21 Replenishment Summit in Nairobi, where African leadership reaffirmed the critical importance of IDA for developing countries and called for an ambitious replenishment of US dollars 120 billion. Our collective efforts must include trust and accountability to ensure that we fulfill our promises and our commitments. Additionally, we launched the Africa Club, the alliance of African multilateral financial institutions to strengthen and support Africa's position in the global financial architecture. This body will serve as a powerful negotiator on behalf of the continent, coordinate with global financial institutions, and leverage African countries' balance sheets to increase investment and create jobs in Africa. We believe that African institutions such as the Afri-Exim Bank, Trade and Development Bank, the Africa Finance Corporation, among others, understand the continent even better. As part of the reform of the international financial architecture, we must not only reform the multilateral institutions, but also support and stop bias against these African institutions. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, climate change remains one of the greatest challenges of our time. Biodiversity loss and pollution have created environmental crises that upend lives, reverse progress in poverty reduction, and strain ecosystems to their breaking point. Extreme weather conditions continue to hinder the development aspirations of many countries, especially in Africa, where severe climate-related hazards are becoming more frequent and more intense. In 2022, over 110 million people in Africa were directly affected by climate-related disasters, resulting in more than $8.5 billion in economic damages. According to the Emergency Event Database, there were approximately 5,000 fatalities, though the toll is likely to be higher due to underreporting. We are at a crossroads, and the path to correcting the climate course is clear. COP29, to be held this November in Baku, Azerbaijan, presents a critical milestone in ensuring that the solutions we implement are rooted in fairness and opportunity for everybody. However, the new climate financing goal expected at COP29 faces significant hurdles as deep disagreements persist over who should contribute and how much funding is needed. Without swift resolution, these divisions risk derailing our collective progress on climate action, just as the global situation becomes increasingly urgent. Let me be clear. Political posturing and inaction will neither protect the vulnerable from the consequences of a runaway climate crisis, nor save our civilization from ecosystem collapse. It is therefore critical that all nations step forward to meet this moment with ambition and responsibility. As we confront the escalating impacts of climate change, we must also recognize the interconnected environmental challenges we face, such as plastic pollution, which continues to wreak havoc on ecosystems and threatens global sustainability. It is imperative that we adopt a robust global plastics treaty during the 5th round of negotiations in Busan in the Republic of Korea this November. Kenya fully supports an ambitious outcome and the African proposal to establish the Treaty Secretariat in Nairobi, thereby reinforcing UNEP's role. It is indeed unfortunate and regrettable, ladies and gentlemen, that UNEP is the only body where secretariats of conventions created under it are increasingly being carved out and located elsewhere. UNEP, being one of only 2 UN headquarters in the Global South, must not be cannibalized for whatever purpose or reason, let alone excuse. Mr. President, as the host country of UNEP and UN Habitat, I take this opportunity to thank the Assembly for approving the upgrade of the infrastructure at the United Nations office in Nairobi, the largest UN campus in the world. This project includes the construction of new office space and the design of ultra-modern conference facilities. These developments mark a significant milestone towards enhancing the quality and accessibility of Secretariat services to member states. Not only will they serve current needs, but they will also strengthen the future success of multilateralism. We look forward to the Assembly's continued support as construction begins in 2025. It will be critical to ensure that UNON receives sustainable and predictable resources to ensure the timely completion of this upgrade. Kenya will continue to play its part in ensuring that UNON fulfills its mandate. Accordingly, the government of Kenya has undertaken extensive improvements and expansion of physical infrastructure around the complex and will continue working towards making Nairobi a regional and humanitarian hub for the United Nations. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we reflect on the theme of this session, the call for unity in diversity in the pursuit of peace, development, and human dignity, it is evident that we must reimagine international cooperation to align with the complex realities of the 21st century. Our actions must reflect our ambition and commitment to a world where progress is measured not just by economic growth, but by the well-being, rights, and dignity of every person. The challenges we face, from climate crisis to economic inequality, demand a bold rethinking of how we work together, grounded in mutual respect and shared responsibility. The achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals cannot be reserved for the privileged few. It must be a shared success that uplifts all nations, transcending borders and disparities. Our collective efforts to combat climate change must be rooted in fairness and equity, ensuring that no nation or community bears a disproportionate burden. This is our shared journey. We must have a say in the choices we make. We must move beyond outdated paradigms of power and influence to create a system of international cooperation that reflects the aspirations and dignity of every human being. We must embrace a new vision of global solidarity, one that upholds the principles of equity and inclusivity. It is within our power to build a world that embodies the true spirit of the United Nations, a world where every voice is heard, every life is valued, and global progress is shared by all. This is the cooperation our people expect, our future demands, and it is the commitment we must deliver. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Kenya and Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Rashad Mohammed Al-Alimi, President of the Presidential Leadership Council of the Republic of Yemen. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
In the name of God, Your Majesties, Excellencies, Your Excellency President of the General Assembly, Philemon Young, Your Excellency Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, ladies and gentlemen, it is a good omen that I am addressing you today while we celebrate a glorious national occasion for the Yemeni people, which is the 26th of September, when our Yemeni people made history 62 years ago by overthrowing the Imamite racist regime and proclaiming the Republic. This is an opportunity to reiterate our congratulations to the people of Yemen everywhere and to express our pride and appreciation of the courage of those young men and women and opinion leaders who challenge every year on this day, this glorious day, the Houthi oppression machine supported by the Iranian regime. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the government of Yemen remains committed to just and comprehensive peace, in line with national, regional, and international terms of reference. It is, however, necessary to strengthen its position to face any other choices in light of the ongoing Houthi militias' escalation on the local and regional levels and their threat to international navigation. To prevent the expansion and prolongation of this escalation, there is an urgent need for a collective approach to support the government of Yemen and to reinforce its institutional capabilities to protect its territorial waters and to secure all of its national territory. Without addressing these needs and without implementing the relevant international resolutions prohibiting the flow of Iranian weapons and drying up the funding sources, these militias will not engage in any efforts to achieve just and comprehensive peace, and they will not refrain from blackmailing the regional and international communities. History teaches us that leniency with the enemies of peace leads to the most heinous wars, to the most complex and costly ones. Despite the truce approved by the government of Yemen in April 2022, these militias persisted in their military breaches and in their grave violations of human rights and of national and international laws. In October 2022, Houthi militias bombarded the oil exportation ports in the governorates of Hadramaut and Shabwa, thus depriving the Yemeni people from the needed revenues to pay salaries and basic services, which exacerbated the humanitarian plight and led to an unprecedented devaluation of our national currency. Recently, the government suspended its decision to transfer the headquarters of banks from Sana'a, which is under the control of the militias, to the temporary capital Aden, heeding the call of the UN and international community to de-escalate, provided that the Houthis engage in serious talks to address the economic crisis and to revive the peace efforts in line with the roadmap mediated by our brethren in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Sultanate of Oman. Despite all the above, the militias hijacked 3 planes owned by Yemeni airlines. They attacked the Safir oil facility in the governorate of Ma'rib with drones. They issued racist orders and laws to nominate their affiliates in specific public function positions, especially in the judiciary. This suggests that they will be taking more oppressive measures against public freedoms and civic work. This ongoing pattern of reckless escalation in response to the de-escalation initiatives requires the international community to take firm policies and push these militias towards the choice of peace in line with international resolutions, particularly Resolution 2216, instead of their senseless escalation. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, 4 months ago, terrorist Houthi militias arrested dozens of UN personnel, to be added to the thousands of innocent men, women, children, elderly who disappeared in their prisons years ago. Particularly activist Mohammed Qahtan included in a Security Council resolution. There is a widespread belief that the United Nations is responsible for giving these militias the opportunity to kidnap this unprecedented number of relief workers and NGO staff, as well as activists and civil society leaders, by not heeding the call of the Yemeni government to transfer their headquarters from Sana'a to the temporary capital Aden. By not taking seriously these militias and by keeping their headquarters in Sana'a, the United Nations unintentionally enabled these terrorists to take their personnel and assets as hostages and to use them as a bargaining chip to blackmail the international community and to achieve negotiation concessions that cannot be accepted under any circumstances. This ongoing situation cannot be defended nor justified. The presence of UN headquarters in Sana'a emboldens these militias that are designated on terrorist lists, and it endangers relief workers and human rights defenders. Hence, the need to reconsider these policies and measures immediately. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, Houthi militias, with their ongoing terrorist attacks on international maritime navigation in the Red Sea and the surrounding waterways, prove that they represent a growing threat not only to Yemen, as some used to believe, but also to the stability of the region as a whole, and to the secure flow of international trade, which exceeds trillions of dollars. Today, they are reinforcing their position as the first rebel group in history having used ballistic missiles and drones against civilian commercial vessels. Late last month, Houthi militias hit the Sonian tanker, which was carrying 1 million barrels of crude oil, causing fires which could have led to one of the worst oil spills in history before the vessel was salvaged by the international coalition. This is not the first such incident caused by these militias. These militias boasted having sunk 2 vessels previously. They also hindered for years the efforts to save the decaying sulfur tanker, which was carrying similar amounts of crude oil. It proves that their terrorist activities will remain an ongoing threat to maritime navigation. Ladies and gentlemen, for years, the Yemeni economy has been facing complex challenges, but the terrorist Houthi attacks on the oil facilities deepened the funding crisis and deprived the people and government of Yemen from necessary revenues to pay salaries and provide services. The economic war waged by these militias are part of a larger hostile strategy aiming at weakening the ability of the government to provide basic services and to pay public service salaries, thus aggravating the humanitarian crisis for more than 14 million Yemenis. Therefore, the international community should seriously consider the devastating effects of these terrorist acts and to provide the vital infrastructure to defend maritime transportation vessels in Yemeni ports, to support the right of the Yemenis and of the Yemeni government to benefit from their resources and improve their living conditions. Protecting the arteries of the Yemeni economy is necessary not only to recover and rebuild our future, but it is important also for the stability of the region and for the security of energy on the long term. Therefore, we reiterate our call to the international community to provide immediate comprehensive support to address the devastating humanitarian conditions and to lay the foundations for a long-term economic recovery. This should include not only immediate humanitarian assistance to alleviate sufferings, but it should also include accountability mechanisms, especially in the regions under the Houthi control. It also requires greater investments in infrastructure, healthcare, education, and sustainable development. It requires building the national capacities to curb the impacts of climate change, which has left hundreds of victims and displaced thousands within the last 2 months. Yemen's recovery is not only a national matter, it is a regional and international need. The stability of Yemen is decisive to safeguard peace and stability in the region and trade routes in the Arabian and Red Seas, as well as surrounding waterways, including the Suez Canal. We have appreciated international support in the past, and we will keep thanking you for shouldering your moral responsibilities. We also thank the coalition to restore legitimacy led by the KSA and the UAE to meet the aspirations of the Yemeni people to stability, peace and prosperity, and provide the resources we need to rebuild our institutions and our social fabric. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the Arab region is facing today a challenging test in building the state and in joining the civilizational progress. However, every time the countries of the region achieve a true transformation towards development, peace and prosperity, and towards empowering their people to exercise their political, economic and social rights, they are met with evil forces which intervene with their destructive agendas, emboldened by the international leniency towards these rogue groups and their supporters. The outcome of this battle between the forces of peace and the axis of evil will determine who will survive, develop on this part of the world. It will determine whether the region will be dragged into more chaos, civil wars, hegemony, weapons, oppression, and underdevelopment. The road to peace goes through the forces of moderation in the region, led by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which has been defending the international resolutions and which extended a helping hand by hosting millions of those fleeing wars and armed conflicts. Therefore, we are grateful for these countries, and the world should depend on them to lay the foundations of peace and stability and to maximize our benefits from their economic and social development. Ladies and gentlemen, we should end the false rhetorics concerning the issue of Yemen, especially those minimizing the role of Iran and of their weapons and proxies in destabilizing Yemen, the region, and the world. Ladies and gentlemen, the brutal Israeli war on the Palestinian people should cease immediately. This is the first step to achieve peace and to eliminate Iran's proxies, which are escalating the situation in the region. Iran has been manipulating the just Palestinian cause, and this did not come from a vacuum. It stems from a history of blackmailing and of propaganda, only leading to undermining the peace process and reversing the gains of the Palestinian people and their right to establish a fully sovereign independent state. The same holds true for Yemen, ending the plight. And as is the case for Yemen, ending the plight of the Palestinian people should be based on implementing the international resolutions, especially the Arab Peace Initiative. And as is the case for both Yemen and Palestine, the only way to deter the wanton Israeli aggression on Lebanon will be through a firm stance from the international community and through the unity of all the Lebanese and their independent decision and the non-interference in their internal affairs so that the Lebanese state can recover the choice of peace and war. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, it is important to recall that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights quotes, I quote, "the inherent dignity and the equal and inalienable rights of all the members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world." End of quotation. Today, these values are undermined, and as are the ethics and national and international norms, with the grave violations perpetrated by leaders of Al-Qaeda and Daesh and by the Houthi militias, promising the world more devastation. Thank you, and may the peace of God be upon you.
En nombre de la Asamblea.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Presidential Leadership Council of the Republic of Yemen.
La Asamblea escuchará ahora.
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Brice Clotaire Oligui Nguema, President of the Transition and Head of State of the Gabonese Republic. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Monsieur le Président,
President of the General Assembly, Heads of State and Government, Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Gabonese people, I am happy to take part in the work of this General Assembly of the United Nations. President Philemon Yang, in taking the floor for the first time before this august assembly, I would like at the outset to address to you my warm congratulations on your outstanding election to preside the 79th session of the General Assembly of the United Nations. And I wish you all the best. I express my compliments too to the seasoned interpreter that you are, representative of a brotherly country, Cameroon, linked to Gabon by geography, history, and culture. Please be assured of the full support of my country throughout your mandate. And finally, I would like to pay tribute, well-deserved tribute, to Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of our organization, for his tireless devotion and commitment to servicing the ideals of the United Nations. Mr. President, I'd like to take this opportunity to bring to your attention that the current debate is taking place at a moment where my country, Gabon, has just celebrated the first anniversary of the liberation coup. Indeed, our path towards the construction of a new Gabon to date has been able to keep its promises that we announced here at the last general debate, namely the establishment of transitional institutions, the release of prisoners of conscience, permanent inclusivity, the holding of an inclusive national dialogue, the drafting of a new constitution. The next step is to organize the referendum in the coming months and the adoption of an electoral code and a revision of the electoral register in accordance with the timetable adopted during the inclusive national dialogue. All of this progress, supported by the people of Gabon, contributes to a progressive return to our constitutional order through free, transparent, and peaceful elections as soon as possible. Apart from these points that I have just outlined, significant reforms have been undertaken in sectors that directly affect human development. Roads, healthcare centres, schools, a return to school grants, the opening up of competitions for our major universities, lifting of the recruitment freeze, and the payment of pension arrears, all of this respecting our international commitments at the same time. And this is the opportunity for me to thank all of our partners, friendly countries and donors of national and international funds that have accompanied us in this transition process, despite the difficulties of the process. Ladies and gentlemen, the current General Assembly is focusing on the subject unity and diversity for the advancement of peace, sustainable development, and human dignity everywhere and for everyone. This is part of our building of a planetary community that is in harmony with the principles mentioned in the preamble to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948. Gabon, faithful as we are to our tradition of peace, unreservedly supports this project, aiming at a more just and inclusive interactive world. On the day after the liberation coup of the 30th of August 2023, that was carried out without bloodshed, we advocated for the preservation of peace and for national unity by appealing to all stakeholders of the nation, whatever their origins, their beliefs, or their social status, in an effort to build a fairer and more prosperous Gabon. Ladies and gentlemen, respect for life, territorial integrity, the sovereignty of states to freely choose their partners, and rejection of violence, all of these things favor peace building. With regard to sustainable development, my country maintains a firm and coherent position in favor of protecting the environment. I would like to recall that for several years now, Gabon has dedicated 13 national parks to the service of humanity, thus contributing to the absorption of more than 100 million net tons of CO2 per year and the preservation of threatened species. Nevertheless, this does not mean in any way that we are bypassing the expectations of our population who are focused on their basic needs being met. That is why this forum is the occasion to once again recall to industrialized nations the need for them to respect their commitments by supporting the countries that host the greatest carbon sinks in the world. Mr. President, with regard to security, as many of us would believe, I feel that it is an urgent matter to provide appropriate responses to the numerous conflicts that we see in the world, and particularly in Africa. I would like to once again welcome the adoption by the Security Council on the 21st of December 2023 of Resolution 2719 on the financing of peace support operations led by the African Union. In accordance with the new Agenda for Peace of the Secretary-General of the United Nations, this resolution, presented jointly by Gabon, Ghana and Mozambique, today is a crucial part of the architecture for international peace and security. Its implementation is an absolute imperative. And I would like to take this opportunity to support the efforts of the Secretary-General aimed at providing a realistic, pragmatic and sustainable political solution for the Moroccan Sahara. I would also like to welcome the official announcement made by the United States of America that they support the admission of 2 African states as permanent members of the Security Council. However, Africa is expecting broader support from other permanent members of the Security Council for this initiative. And at the same time, we expect access for African members to the right to veto. The right to veto, this would simply be justice for our continent. Over and above the African continent, I would invite you to not avert your gaze from Gaza. It's time more than ever before for lasting peace with a view to the harmonious existence of 2 states, Palestinian and Israeli. And I would also like to reiterate the position of Gabon for the lifting of the economic, trade and financial embargo imposed on Cuba because of its negative impact on the well-being of the population. President, ladies and gentlemen, as President Félix Houphouët-Boigny said, peace is not just a word, it's a behavior, it's a genuine state of mind. This legitimate aspiration of peoples is an ideal. It recommends that developed countries that have experience in resolving conflicts share with other states their know-how to build a more just and more balanced world. Unity in diversity for making progress in peace, sustainable development and human dignity everywhere and for everyone is, in my view, a genuine society of dialogue, tolerance and respect for others. This should help us to build a world where development will be adapted to everyone's needs, to the needs of all peoples. Mr. President, With regard to economic and financial matters, the 2024 report of the United Nations on Sustainable Development underscores once again the urgency for mobilizing massive funding in order to plug the financing gap in the economy, aimed at several $billion. This is a reality. The international financial system, as it is at the moment, does not enable us to steer investment towards development and thus to ensure the dignity of our populations, which we are addressing in our debate this year. I also share with you the willingness of my peers to reform international financial institutions. This is crucial in order to produce financing for developing countries. Secretary General of the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. My country, Gabon, is resolutely committed to restore happiness, and we plan to fully play our role to ensure that we build a human community that is working together and which everyone desires. Together, let us pool our efforts in the hope of a better future by acting in a different way in order to preserve the human race. I thank you.
En nombre de la Asamblea.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Transition and Head of State of the Gabonese Republic.
Seguidamente,
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Faustin Archange Touadéra, Head of State of the Central African Republic. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée générale,
President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is a renewed honor for me to be taking the floor here before the entire world, speaking on behalf of my beautiful country, the Central African Republic. I am speaking with a view to contributing to the general debate on the theme of this 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Through its participation in the General Assembly, the Central African Republic is reaffirming its commitment to contributing to our joint pursuit of trust, peace, security, international solidarity, and mutual understanding, all of which are indispensable if we are to build a peaceful world that's conducive to sustainable development and the respect for human dignity, the human dignity of generations past and future, present and future. Before I proceed, I'd like to extend to His Excellency, Mr. Philemon Yang, our heartfelt congratulations. Congratulations on his shining and historic election to preside over the proceedings of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Your election is the symbol of an honor and well-deserved tribute that's been granted to our continent, Africa. Your election is also a source of great pride and inspiration for 51 million citizens of CEMAC, the Economic and Monetary Community of Central Africa, which I'm currently presiding over, steering the work of the Conference of the CEMAC Heads of State. It is also a source of pride and inspiration for your beautiful country, the Sister Republic of Cameroon. Your consummate knowledge of international affairs, as well as your far-ranging personal qualities, are a great advantage and a guarantee that our proceedings will be met with success. I stand convinced that you will do your best to serve the interests of the United Nations and all its member states, implementing the UN's vast reform program so that the organization becomes more effective, more inclusive, more representative, and better suited to our changing world, as well as to the resolution of the serious and pressing problems shaking all of humanity. Rest assured, you have the full support of the Central African Republic in your task. I'd also like to commend the high caliber of the work done and the accomplishments of President Denis Francis throughout the 78th session of the General Assembly. We extend to Mr. Denis Francis our gratitude and our satisfaction. United Nations Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, I'd like to reiterate to you the gratitude of the Central African Republic and my country's full support, as well as the support of the government. We support your various initiatives which seek to make the United Nations a place where the efforts of nations come together. As you know, on the 30th of July of this year, the United Nations Security Council decided to lift in its entirety the unjust, illegitimate, and iniquitous arms embargo that had been imposed on the Central African Armed Forces for a decade. An embargo which caused us irreparable harm over those 10 years. Speaking from this rostrum, I'd like to extend to you the gratitude of the Central African people. We are grateful to the UN Security Council for its wise decision. A decision which, although belated, will allow my country to continue to act so as to rebuild national peace and security, and to work together with other states in the pursuit of peace, sustainable development, and the human dignity of present and future generations. I'd like to seize this opportunity to reiterate to all of you, all those who held the Central African Republic in their hearts and supported our noble fight. You have the gratitude of our people. The Central African Republic has vast mining potential. Therefore, I'm convinced that we'll continue to receive your support for the lifting of the embargo on diamonds imposed by the Kimberley Process, an embargo which has circumscribed our ability to work for peace, sustainable development, and the human dignity of present and future generations. Mr. President, the theme of this 79th General Assembly session is leaving no one behind, acting together for the advancement of peace, sustainable development, and human dignity for present and future generations. The theme is tied up with particularly important, significant recommendations, which will be of import in our discussions on the reform of the global peace and security architecture, as well as our discussions geared towards achieving the SDGs. As we know, peace is inextricably linked to sustainable development. Regrettably, as we meet here at this great world forum, year in, year out, as we meet at other fora for that matter, the world continues grappling with serious existential threats, becoming more unstable and more vulnerable. This 79th session is taking place at a very turbulent time, a time marked by mounting geopolitical crises, the war between Russia and Ukraine, the war between Israel and Hamas, the war in Sudan and in the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, terrorism, deteriorating economic conditions which are strangling growth in Africa, as well as rising fuel prices. We stand convinced that only dialogue can help us to put an end to conflict in a lasting way. The Central African Republic implores the parties to these various conflicts to opt for dialogue and diplomacy so as to find a solution to the various disagreements at the root of these conflicts and to save millions of human lives. The Central African Republic would like to note that the security situation has been stable for the most part in 2024. We are preparing to deepen our democratic roots by holding municipal and regional elections in the very near future, something that will be a first over the last 4 decades. With this in mind, special measures have been taken to apprehend remaining armed groups. These groups can no longer control various portions of our country's territory. As a result, they're engaging in organized crime, illegal exploitation, and fraudulent trafficking of natural resources, and they're doing this so as to be able to acquire military material and equipment. The 10th session of the Strategic Committee for Disarmament, Demobilization, Reintegration, and Rehabilitation, as well as the commemoration in Bangui of African Amnesty Month by the African Union's Peace and Security Council, this happened just a few days ago, were an opportunity for us to fully appreciate the significant headway that's been made, and which has been possible thanks to the fact that stakeholders have taken ownership and participated in the global peace and security process underpinned by the Political Agreement for Peace and Reconciliation, as well as the Luanda Joint Roadmap. Despite of the progress that's been made, the Central African Republic continues to grapple with various challenges, specifically as regards the building of barracks, so we can station units in defense areas close to the places from which threats are emanating, as well as the acquisition of military material and equipment for our defense and security forces. Mr. President, climate change is having very serious repercussions. Deadly flooding, drought, and large-scale fires, which we've witnessed all over the world. These give rise to various risks, from food insecurity to water stress to competition for natural resources, as well as losses of livelihoods and displacement. These interdependent, cascading risks can have very serious knock-on effects on peace, security, and development across continents. In sub-Saharan Africa, which is the epicenter of humanitarian crises, environmental disasters have resulted, this year alone, in over 1,000 deaths and 4 million climate refugees, not to mention invaluable material damage, specifically in our neighboring country, Chad, where the number of victims continues to grow following heavy rain, which prompted large-scale flooding and compelled people to evacuate. Speaking from this high rostrum, the United Nations, a symbol par excellence of human solidarity, to express the solidarity of the Central African people to people all over the world who have been hard hit by natural disasters. Our world is being rattled by bloody conflicts. It's also threatened from time to time by deadly weather events, devastating weather events. And in this world, developing countries, which have been impoverished by centuries of slavery, colonialism, and neocolonialism characterized by multifaceted meddling in their domestic affairs, unjust raw materials prices, onerous conditionalities imposed through the international financial architecture, these developing countries are looking on powerlessly as new security, financial, economic, food-related, and environmental challenges mount. Funding promises for vulnerable countries are taking time to come to fruition. Adaptation measures promised at various COPs and rising temperatures, all of these are changing as often as the weather does, beholden to the political, geopolitical, and geostrategic whims of the great powers. We're well aware of just how dangerous climate phenomena are. Thus, my country has crafted sector-specific policies. However, their effectiveness depends on climate funding, which is still unreliable. The Central African Republic would like to urge the United Nations to do more to implement the climate peace and development nexus, establishing synergies between climate adaptation and peace building, so as to holistically address the vulnerabilities linked to climate change, other vulnerabilities, and the risk of conflict. Mr. President, the world is teetering dangerously close to the brink. The UN peace and security architecture is being subjected to enormous pressure. The reasons Africa put forward in support of its request for legitimate Security Council reform and reform to the veto system are very compelling. A step forward has been taken by the United States of America. The US has endorsed the establishment of 2 permanent seats for Africa on the Security Council, as well as a rotating seat for small island developing states, SIDS. This proposal is praiseworthy, of course. But given changes afoot in our world, Africa, which has for a long time remained on the sidelines, cannot be fully satisfied with this proposal, which can only be viewed from the vantage point of a perpetual denial of the veto to Africa. It is time to speed up the reform of the international financial architecture so as to remedy inequality, to mobilize adequate funding for the achievement of the SDGs, to meet the financing needs of developing countries, to be able to reform the implementation of and compliance with multilateral environmental agreements, which will help us to make our common ambition of protecting the planet a reality. Mr. President, demographic estimates indicate that in 2050, half of the world's global youth will live in Africa. Also, half of Africa's 54 countries would have seen their populations almost double. I applaud the Pact for the Future, as well as the Global Digital Compact and the Declaration on Future Generations, annexed thereto, all of which were adopted at the Summit of the Future. It is high time that we speed up the implementation of the SDGs in the following areas: science, technology, innovation, and digital cooperation. We should do this whilst stressing equity, rights, and universality. Young people today are key agents of positive change. They can make an important contribution to sustainable development, respect for human rights, as well as global peace and security. And yet young people are vulnerable for a number of reasons. This is preventing young people from realizing their full potential and exercising their fundamental rights. It therefore behooves us to pledge to transform investment in young people, in women, girls, and persons with disability, so as to guarantee a better future for us all. As for the Central African Republic, our ambitious 2024-2028 National Development Plan strikes a better balance between the needs and interests of present and future generations. It does this by making human capital development one of the plan's strategic pillars. To conclude, I hope that the spirit that prompted the establishment of the United Nations will tirelessly prevail, thereby helping to create a fertile atmosphere for resolving the problems plaguing international peace and security, sustainable development, and this for the benefit of all humanity. I thank you.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the head of the State of the Central African Republic. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Mahmoud Abbas, President of the State of Palestine. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
We will not leave. We will not leave. We will not leave. Palestine is our homeland. It is the land of our fathers, our grandfathers. It will remain ours. And if anyone were to leave, It would be the occupying usurpers. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Mr. Philemon Yang, President of the General Assembly of the United Nations. Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, heads and members of delegations, esteemed guests, peace and God's blessings be upon you all. I come to you today as my people, and for almost a year now, are subjected to one of the most heinous crimes of our era. It is a crime of a full-scale war, of genocide, that Israel is perpetrating. Israel, the occupying state. A crime that so far has killed more than 40,000 martyrs in Gaza alone, and thousands remain under the rubble. A crime that has injured more than 100,000 others to this day, and matters are getting worse. Hundreds of Palestinian families have been annihilated. Entire family names have been wiped out of the civil record. More than 100 families have been completely wiped out of the civil record. They no longer exist. Thousands have died because of the spread of disease and epidemics and the shortages in medicine and water. Moreover, more than 2 million Palestinians in Gaza have left their homes multiple times in search of safety and fleeing the systemic operations that the Israeli occupying army is perpetrating. And as this war of aggression continues, dozens are being killed every day, and double that amount is being injured amongst our bereft people in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank and in Jerusalem. I'm not here to respond to the lies of the Israeli Prime Minister, lies that he said in his speech before the U.S. Congress in July, where he claimed that his army does not kill innocent civilians in Gaza. I ask you by God, who is it then that killed more than 15,000 children of the 40,000, and an equal number of women and elderly persons from our people? And who is it then that is continuing to kill them? I ask you to answer me by God. Stop this crime. Stop it now. Stop killing children and women. Stop the genocide. Stop sending weapons to Israel. This madness cannot continue. The entire world is responsible for what is happening to our people in Gaza and the West Bank. The West Bank that is under a daily and continuous Israeli aggression. It is under a vicious settlement activity. They're building everywhere in Palestine, as if all of Palestine is theirs. It is subjected to the terrorism of gangs of settlers under the patronage and support of the Israeli government and the occupying army, which destroys hundreds of houses in the lands of Palestine, not to mention what our eternal capital, Al-Quds, is being subjected to in terms of campaigns to change its nature, to Judaize it, and to aggress it and its holy sites and landmarks, to change its historic and legal status. We've recently heard a terrorist Israeli minister calling for building a temple in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. We must condemn and stop this reckless minister and those like him who want to set fire, a fire of religious conflict and strife that will burn everything in its way. The Aqsa Mosque and its surroundings, ladies and gentlemen, is the exclusive property of Muslims. This has been endorsed by a resolution taken by the League of Nations in 1930. This was a resolution by the League of Nations, and we will accept nothing else regardless of the circumstances. Ladies and gentlemen, we have repeatedly warned here in the General Assembly that the situation in the occupied land of the State of Palestine warns of an explosion, and this explosion has happened. It happened on October 7th of last year and afterwards. And from the very first day, I stressed the need to immediately stop the war. I condemned the killing of civilians regardless of who they are and regardless of what side they were on or any people they were from. I demanded the release of prisoners and those detained by both sides. There is no need to detain women, children, and the elderly. We've said this repeatedly. To anyone who has those people detained, I called for immediately going to the negotiations table to implement the two-state solution based on international resolutions. But instead of heeding the voice of reason, the Israeli government took advantage of what happened to launch an all-out war of genocide against Gaza. It committed and continues to commit war crimes as acknowledged by the international community. They're called war crimes. Israel today is now launching a new aggression on the brotherly Lebanese people. The Lebanese people are now being subjected to a war of genocide. And Israel must stop the war in Lebanon and in Palestine. We condemn this aggression and we demand that it stops immediately. Israel has reoccupied the Gaza Strip in its entirety, and it has destroyed it almost entirely, so that Gaza is no longer fit for life. Most homes have been destroyed. The same applies to most buildings, health facilities, educational facilities, economic buildings, roads, churches, mosques, water plants, electric plants, and sanitation plants. Anybody who goes to Gaza who'd known it before would not recognize it anymore. It's no longer there. 75% of everything in Gaza has been fully destroyed. If Israel thinks that it would get away from being held accountable and punished for these crimes, then it is delusional. The international community must immediately impose sanctions on Israel. The massacres, the crimes, the genocide that Israel has been perpetrating against our people since its inception in 1948 to this very day will not go unpunished. There is no statute of limitations. Rights will never be lost as long as there are those who demand them. And despite our repeated calls and demands, the world has not succeeded in obliging Israel, this transient state, to stop this war of genocide and its war crimes against innocent civilian residents. We regret that the U.S. administration, the democracy of the world, the largest democracy in the world, obstructed 3 times draft resolutions in the Security Council demanding Israel to observe a ceasefire. The U.S. alone stood and said, no, the fighting is going to continue. It did this by using the veto. And added to that, it furnished Israel with the deadly weapons that it used to kill thousands of innocent civilians, children and women. And this further encouraged Israel to continue its aggression. As long as the U.S. is supporting it, then why not keep going, since it's already an aggressing state? This is the United States, the very country that was the only member in the Security Council that voted against granting the State of Palestine full membership in the UN. We don't deserve membership in the eyes of America, so they use the veto against it. I don't understand how the United States could insist on opposing our people, insist on depriving us of our legitimate rights to freedom and independence, as is the right of the rest of the countries, 194 countries, and we are no less than them. Ladies and gentlemen, Israel, which refuses to implement United Nations resolutions, does not deserve to be a member in this international organization. Israel, whose permanent representative in this organization says that the very building of the United Nations, and he said that this building must be removed. This building that we are sitting in right now, it must be wiped off the face of the earth. This country does not deserve to be a member in this organization. It is, from the very beginning, it has from the very beginning not fulfilled the conditions for membership. Because in 1949, when it submitted its membership application to the UN imposed two conditions. First, to accept and implement Resolution 181 and Resolution 194. Without implementing these two conditions, you will not be granted membership in the United Nations. Moshe Sharet, the foreign minister at the time, wrote a pledge. You will see it. A pledge, a written pledge, that he and Israel are committed to the implementation of those resolutions. And since 1949 to this very day, nothing has happened. We are going to submit a request, an application to the General Assembly on this matter. And as I said, if you return, then we will return. If they do not step back, then we will do more. I take this opportunity to commend the member states of the United Nations that voted with more than a two-thirds majority in favor of the draft resolution submitted by the State of Palestine, supported by a large number of friendly and sisterly countries, to adopt the ICJ's historic advisory opinion issued on the 19th of July 2024 to end the illegal Israeli occupation of the State of Palestine in a period of 12 months. For the very first time, there is a specific time frame. We demand the implementation of this particular requirement, including an immediate cessation of annexation and settlement activities, dismantling of existing settlements, and evacuating settlers from Palestinian territories. There's 600,000 settlers, and they're living on our land. Why don't they go back to their homes? We must give reparations to Palestinians and for damages that were a result of the unlawful policies and the practices of the occupation, and many other such issues that were mentioned in the ICJ's advisory opinion. We want what the ICJ stated and what the entire world accepted in the General Assembly with a vast majority that far exceeds a two-thirds majority. And Israel must be made to implement it. We rely on this resolution, which is the embodiment of international will and the principles of international law and the mechanisms that were adopted in this regard to guarantee implementation. We hope that this resolution would be implemented. Of the 1,000 resolutions taken on the Palestinian people since 1948 until this very day, and not a single one has been implemented yet. Ladies and gentlemen, today I feel very grateful as well, as I see this large, great shift in the positions of member states in the United Nations as they support Palestinians' rights to an independent state that is recognized and that deserves full membership in this organization, as is the case with the rest of the countries in the world that love freedom and peace. In the name of the Palestinian people, I thank you for this support. I thank you for your support of what is right, of justice, to achieve peace in our region. I call upon you to apply the laws of international law according to responsibilities and sovereignty. We don't ask you for more than you can do. We ask every state to give us our support within the realm of its responsibility and sovereignty. I also express our gratitude and appreciation for the demonstrations that spoke against the genocide in Gaza and that supported Palestinian rights that have been taking place throughout the world, including the American people. And I acknowledge the American people are marching in the streets in these demonstrations, and we are grateful to them. We appreciate what is happening in European countries and the noble supporters that come to Palestine, risking their lives as Israelis attack them. And here, I would like to make special mention of the Turkish-American martyr Aisha Noor, killed by the occupation army in cold blood. I say to those, the Palestinian people will not forget your honorable stand. We will remember you proudly when the occupation is eliminated and when our people enjoy freedom and independence. Ladies and gentlemen, recently there was much talk about the next day, the day after. What shall we do on the day after? What is our policy for the day after? And I say to you, the day after the end of the war in the Gaza Strip, I take this opportunity today to give you our view of what is needed immediately and on the day after the war ends. This is our proposal. We propose it to you. You can accept it, you can change it, you can amend it. We are ready for all that. First of all, a comprehensive and permanent ceasefire in Gaza and an end to the military aggressions and attacks by terrorist settlers in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Second, humanitarian aid must be delivered urgently in an organized manner and in sufficient quantities, because there's nothing in Gaza, and they need everything. This humanitarian aid must be delivered throughout Gaza. Third, a full Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. We refuse the establishment of buffer zones or taking any part from Gaza. Gaza is only 7 kilometers by 40, and Israel wants to cut it up. It wants a piece here and a piece there, and we will not allow a single centimeter of Gaza to be taken. We demand that we stop the forced displacement inside the Gaza Strip or outside the Gaza Strip. We demand the return of those displaced to their homes or to have housing provided to them. Netanyahu wants in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip people to be displaced, to be evacuated to Egypt and to Jordan. We refused. The Jordanian and Egyptian governments, and I thank them for this, said we will not allow the displacement of any Palestinians and eviction of the Palestinians from their lands. Fourth, we demand the protection of UNRWA and humanitarian organizations from Israel's actions and to provide political and financial support to these organizations so that they can perform their role and offer their services to the Palestinian refugees until they return home. UNRWA was established to do its job until the refugees return. And every day Israel finds an excuse to convince others that UNRWA's work must be ended. Fifth, we demand international protection for the Palestinians on the lands of their occupied land. We want protection. We are not fighting Israel. We cannot fight Israel. And we don't want to fight. But we want protection. We want our children, our women, our families to be protected internationally. Sixth, Palestine, the state of Palestine must shoulder its responsibilities in the Gaza Strip and impose its full mandate on it and jurisdiction on it, including the border checkpoints, especially the Rafah international border between Egypt and Palestine, as part of a comprehensive plan. This has existed before, and it must return to the way it was. Seventh, and within the context of a comprehensive national reform process. This is a process that we're undertaking, and most countries have reviewed it, supported it, confirmed it, and thanked the Palestinian government for it. And hopefully we will continue with this process till the very end. In terms of this process, we will reconstruct our infrastructure and state institutions destroyed by Israel. We will revive the economy and establish sustainable development and rebuild the Gaza Strip. And we will hold the state of Israel fully responsible. Eighth, the authority of the state of Palestine and the Palestinian government and the PLO, the legitimate and sole representative of the Palestinian people, will have authority on all Palestinian territories in the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and Eastern Jerusalem, as has been stipulated for us by international law. We are not asking for more, but we will not accept any less. The West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and the Eastern Jerusalem. We will not ask for more, but we will not accept any less. We will hold general elections. We're ready to hold the elections. We've been ready in the past, but Israel refused to allow us to hold these elections in Jerusalem. But if this were to happen, we're ready to hold these elections and to form a Palestinian government in accordance with the results of these elections. Ninth, we will continue to mobilize the largest possible international support so that the state of Palestine can achieve full membership in the United Nations as soon as possible. What do we lack? To be sitting amongst you. What do we lack? To be on the same footing as 194 official member states in the United Nations. We have the land, we have the authority, we have the people, we have the culture, we have the knowledge, we have everything that we need. We ask you to help us. 10th, the full implementation of the General Assembly resolution on the advisory opinion that we mentioned, issued by the International Court of Justice in a manner that would lead to the end of the occupation in 12 months, as stipulated by the resolution, as set by the advisory opinion. Number 11, hold an international peace conference under the auspices of the United Nations within a year to apply the two-state solution. So we hold this international conference so that we would resolve all the problems that remain between us and Israel. By the way, we recognize the state of Israel, but Israel doesn't recognize us. We want a solution that would protect both countries, the state of Palestine and the state of Israel, so that they can coexist in peace, stability, and security. Number 12, to adopt international peacekeeping forces by virtue of a Security Council resolution between the states of Palestine and Israel to guarantee the security of both countries. We call for guaranteeing the security of both countries. These are the elements of our vision for the day after, for today and for the day after the war ends, in the state of Palestine in general. And I call upon you to adopt this plan and to provide all the necessary means to guarantee its success. Ladies and gentlemen, a few weeks ago, I declared that I've decided to lead a Palestinian delegation to the Gaza Strip so that we can stand by our people who have been exhausted by the Israeli genocide war. I call upon you to support this decision by issuing a United Nations decision resolution by the United Nations here, by pressuring the occupying government so that it would not obstruct this effort. And here I welcome any state, any party that wants to join us in this visit. We'll be happy to go with you to Gaza so that we could all see the tragedies that are taking place. I salute our heroic people that are sacrificing all that is precious for Palestine, in the Gaza of sacrifice, in the West Bank of solidarity, of Al-Quds, which is our crown jewel and our capital. We salute our people in the diaspora, in the refugee camps, to our brave prisoners in Israeli prisons. 6,000 prisoners. Israel arrests whoever it wants. Those prisoners whose dignity is being violated every day. Palestine will be free. It will be free despite anyone who objects to that. Our people will live on the land of their fathers and grandfathers as they have done for more than 6,000 years. They will continue their legitimate struggle for independence. The occupation will end, will end, will end. God's and peace blessings be upon you.
En nombre de la Asamblea.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the State of Palestine. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Mr. Adama Barrow, President of the Republic of the Gambia. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
President of the 79th session of the UN General Assembly, Secretary General Mr. Antonio Guterres, Your Majesties and Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Heads of Delegation, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for the Gambia to participate in the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly and to engage in meaningful dialogue with global leaders and partners on the vision of shaping a more prosperous future for humankind. Your Excellency, Mr. President, allow me to express my heartfelt congratulations to you on your assuming the role of President for the 79th session. I similarly wish to register sincere gratitude to His Excellency Ambassador Denis Francis for his exemplary leadership and accomplishments during the 78th session. Mr. President, as we undertake to chart the future we envision, we welcome the initiative presented by Secretary General Guterres at the summit of the future under the theme Multilateral Solutions for a Better Tomorrow. My delegation firmly believes that the path to a better tomorrow lies in multilateralism and closer international cooperation. Through our collective responsibility and inclusive participation, we can decisively confront and overcome our challenges and bottlenecks. The high-level summit of the future has determined that human actions are largely responsible for the challenges we face today. Therefore, it is within our power to ably address the disasters that continuously trouble our nations. To succeed, however, the international community must recommit to implementing the resolutions of the Summit of the Future to tackle such critical global challenges as climate change, poverty, transitional crimes, and conflict. These incidents underscore the urgent need for comprehensive reforms within the United Nations system, particularly the UN Security Council and the international financial institutions. We must equally strive for a more representative, just and inclusive United Nations to shape the world we so dearly want. Mr. President, the Gambia's perspective on the theme leaving no one behind, acting together for the advancement of peace, sustainable development, and human dignity for present and future generations, aligns closely with the principles and aspirations of Agenda 2030 for sustainable development. In accordance with the principles of the United Nations Charter, the theme serves as a crucial reminder to the international community of the need for solidarity and renewed commitment. With specific reference to the Gambia, the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, is central to our national agenda. And we are committed to ensuring that our development efforts are both sustainable and impactful. Like many least developed countries, LDCs, the Gambia faces huge challenges that pose serious threats to our survival as a nation, hence requiring collective international efforts to resolve. Consequently, the global community needs to assist the least developed countries, especially to address the burden of inequality, build more robust economies, and create policy space for economic growth. To tackle the debt burden and internal state weaknesses, we need to increase investment in capacity building. Also, we must jointly endeavor to bridge the digital divide and support technology transfer to advance development. Mr. President, we live in a world with widening inequalities, thus suppressing the weak and making the conditions of the poor worse, grossly violates the expressed ideals and spirit of the Summit of the Future. The Gambia is fully committed to the global call for gender equality and recognizes the indispensable role women play in socio-economic development. We firmly believe that empowering women translates into community empowerment and ultimately inclusive development. For these reasons, my government places great emphasis on women's rights, and we are dedicated to protecting and empowering women. As President, I will continue to ensure that women and girls are protected and given the necessary space to contribute meaningfully to our national development agenda. On youth matters, at the recent consultative summit, stakeholders recommended a sharper focus on innovation and climate change, gender equity, bridging the digital divide, and global governance that promotes youth empowerment through employment, education, and health. The summit's recommendations will inform endeavors to fill policy gaps and expand funding opportunities for better youth engagement. Furthermore, my government commits to aligning our national priorities with global benchmarks and in partnership with youth-led organizations and other stakeholders. We also resolve to use transformative solutions to create greater opportunities for all. Mr. President, the Gambia believes in collective international efforts to combat global challenges. Based on this, last year, the Gambia joined the international community by co-sponsoring UN General Assembly Consensus Resolution 77/276, which sought to engage the International Court of Justice, ICJ, on the obligations of states regarding climate change. Last August, the Gambia submitted its written statement to the ICJ, and we look forward to participating in the oral hearings later this year in The Hague. At the national level, the Gambia remains steadfast in its commitment to promoting human rights and establishing a vibrant democratic environment. The establishment of a National Human Rights Commission and entrenchment of a free, independent, and impartial judiciary provide a solid framework and a sense of security for our citizens, thus ensuring they have a place to seek redress for injustice. I am happy to report that since 2017, the Gambia has neither recorded a single political prisoner, nor has any journalist or human rights activist been jailed in the Gambia. Proudly too, in August 2024, the Gambia was recognized as one of Africa's leading defenders of freedom of expression and ranked third in Article 19's Global Expression Report 2024. We will continue striving to better our situation. Mr. President, as committed advocates of peace and security, respect for basic rights and freedoms, and the application of international law, we stand firmly against injustice, no matter where it occurs. No doubt, as a nation of peace, guided by democratic principles, we have learned valuable lessons to act upon and share. With the help of the international community, we are steadily taking steps to bring closure to the saga of the victims of dictatorship in our country. So far, we have successfully managed the transitional justice and reform processes. Moving forward, we count on your support in the next critical stages of ensuring justice, reconciliation, reparation where necessary. The Gambia will continue advocating preventive approaches to peace building to avert future conflicts. Once again, I take this opportunity to express our appreciation of all the support the UN Peacebuilding Commission has been extending to us. Mr. President, the ongoing conflicts in Palestine, Sudan, the Sahel, Ukraine and Russia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Libya, and other conflict zones demand the international community's immediate intervention. We must explore all diplomatic means to restore lasting peace worldwide and free all innocent people, particularly women and children, from the calamities of war. We call on the international community to prioritize support for the post-conflict reconstruction of Gaza and the improvement of economic conditions in the West Bank, even though the situation in that region is extremely serious. The intense destruction of lives and property continues. The Israel occupation, expansion of settlements, blockade of Gaza, and restrictions in the West Bank, together with the threat of intensifying the war to a regional conflict, continue to worsen the ongoing tensions in the Middle East. Accordingly, I call on the United Nations, the international community, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC member states, to join forces and urgently bring about permanent peace in Palestine. Through recognized structures, I am, as chair of the OIC, committed to stepping up efforts and exploring every possible diplomatic and peaceful channel to resolve the Middle East crisis. The OIC has been very active, and under my leadership will continue to promote and pursue peace in that region. Our common objective is to create a situation wherein Israel and Palestine coexist in peace and security under a two-state arrangement and within the recognized pre-1967 borders. With the sustained support of the OIC, the Gambia has stood as a beacon of hope for the oppressed Rohingya Muslims of Myanmar. Despite relentless efforts over the past 5 years, the oppressive regime of Myanmar has intensified its oppressive campaign through forced exile and unspeakable acts of violence. During my current 3-year tenure as OIC chairman, my office will be available also for dialogue to bring lasting peaceful relations between Iran, its immediate neighbors, and our Western partners. Globally, we have the collective responsibility of acting speedily to peacefully address the situation in Palestine, Sudan, Ukraine, and the Sahel region. Mr. President, we commend the efforts of the Kingdom of Morocco and the viability of the Moroccan Autonomy Initiative. The initiative aligns with the principles of the UN Charter, and it provides a platform for all parties involved in the Moroccan-Sahara conflict to engage in a UN-led dialogue for a permanent, mutually agreed political solution. With regard to recognition and respect for the One China principle, we continue to stand with China. The People's Republic of China represents renewed hope for global rebalancing towards justice, peace, and development. China's generous support to its southern neighbors through its numerous development cooperation initiatives has proven usefully impactful and strategic. Mr. President, migration has ever been a fundamental aspect of human development, and it significantly contributes to the growth of both home and host countries. The international community should address migration in a regulated manner and decriminalize it. Indeed, human beings should not risk losing their lives in pursuit of a better future. In this regard, the Gambia is collaborating with relevant countries to improve the plight of migrants, although we must discourage irregular migration. We are duty-bound to respect the rights of migrants and ensure they are treated with dignity, Mr. President. We recognize that dictatorship, conflict, climate change, poverty, and lack of opportunities are part of the root causes of migration. Economic sanctions imposed on states also contribute to forced migration. The long-standing U.S. embargo against Cuba is an example. My view is that these embargoes should give way to renewed good neighborliness and cooperative relations between the two nations. The international community should address inequality and compassion and fulfill the commitment to the official development assistance pledge made by donor countries. As regards the original countries of migrants, we must uphold the ideals and principles of democracy, good governance, and wise resource management approaches, Mr. President. In conclusion, the international community must prioritize diplomacy, dialogue, and mutual understanding as we confront challenges of global concern. I also urge the private sector to collaborate with our governments in taking concrete actions towards our common goals. Simple yet impactful steps, such as supporting local initiatives, promoting inclusive policies, and engaging in global partnerships, can make a significant difference in the world order. Despite the challenges we face, there is immense potential for positive change through collective endeavors. Let us embrace a message of hope, resilience, and optimism for the future. Together, we can create a world where peace, sustainable development, and human dignity are not mere dreams, but a reality for all. I thank you for your kind attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of the Gambia. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Edgar Leblanc Fils, President of the Presidential Council of the Transition of the Republic of Haiti. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly. Excellencies, President of the General Assembly, Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Heads of Delegation, distinguished delegates, dear compatriots, I have the immense honor to represent here at the General Assembly of the United Nations the Haitian people at a particular crossroads in our history. We are a proud people. Despite all of the difficulties, we've always been able to lift ourselves up. The first black republic in the world, Haiti is proud of its heroic fight for freedom and human dignity. Today, we find ourselves at a decisive crossroads. It is with the weight of this history on our shoulders that we have a hope for a better future. This is how I address you today, calling for solidarity on the part of the international community. Allow me, firstly, to address my warm congratulations to you, Excellency Philemon Yang, former Prime Minister of Cameroon, and congratulate you on your election as President of the 79th session of the General Assembly. Haiti stands firmly by your side, and we assure you of our full support throughout your mandate in order to ensure that this session will be a success for the entire international community. I would also like to indicate the exceptional quality of the work of your predecessor at the 78th session, His Excellency Mr. Dennis Francis of Trinidad and Tobago, who conducted work with dexterity, leadership, and wisdom. I would also like to take this opportunity to express on behalf of the Haitian people our gratitude to you, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, for your visit to Haiti, your presence on our soil, and your unfailing support for our request to the Security Council, in particular with regard to reinforcement of the national police in Haiti, and for all your interventions in favor of Haiti have been very much appreciated, and we will never forget. I would like to express my extreme thanks to the international community for the support given to my country during these times of crisis. This solidarity, which can be seen through the security initiatives, also those of humanitarian aid and support for development, is very much appreciated. It is through this ongoing cooperation and adapted to our situation that Haiti is becoming stronger, more resilient, and will continue towards development and progress. I would like to greet here all Haitian compatriots throughout the world who, whilst being attached to their country of birth, are forced to seek out more favorable skies in order to make a living. Everyone recognizes that they're very hard workers, and I want to tell them, wherever they are, that the Presidential Council of Transition and the government is thinking of them whilst we await an improvement of conditions so that they can come back into the fold. I would also like to take this opportunity to greet Amnesty International and other organizations closely following up on the defense of human rights of Haitians and violations of these rights throughout the world. On behalf of the entire Haitian people, I would like to extend a brotherly greeting to all friends of Haiti that have shown solidarity towards the migrants from our country, and in particular those living in Springfield, Ohio in the United States. The long history of friendship and reciprocal solidarity between our two nations since our participation in the Battle of Savannah of 1779 have enabled us to say with confidence that the American people reject any incitement to hate against our community. The active participation of Haitian immigrants at various levels of life in the United States is tangible and significant. In this regard, the passions that naturally arise during an election campaign should never serve as a pretext for xenophobia or racism in a country such as the United States, a country forged by immigrants from all countries and which has become a model of democracy for the world. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this 79th General Assembly is leaving no one behind, acting together for the advancement of peace, sustainable development and human dignity for present and future generations. This very much resounds with the major challenges that we are facing today. This theme is an urgent call for unity and international cooperation in a context where inequalities, conflicts and the climate crisis are rendering even more vulnerable millions of people throughout the world. Whilst many nations are struggling to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, it is more necessary than ever to guarantee that all voices, and in particular those of the most marginalized, are included in the global decision-making process. This theme is also of capital importance when it comes to the context of the crisis in Haiti. It speaks to our fight to restore peace and stability, ensuring that every Haitian citizen is able to enjoy their fundamental rights. Acting together, as underscored by the theme, is essential for Haiti because our recovery can only happen with this international solidarity. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today our world is facing unprecedented challenges that are of deep concern to the entire international community. The United Nations, in its historic mission to promote peace, security and sustainable development, is in the front lines of the crises that are not only threatening isolated nations but the entirety of humanity. Climate change undoubtedly is one of the great perils of our time. According to recent data of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, global temperatures have already increased by 1.1 degrees Celsius since the pre-industrial era. This increase has led to an increase in intensification of climate phenomena such as hurricanes, droughts and floods, disasters which particularly affect the most vulnerable nations such as Haiti. In 2023, the United Nations Programme for Development estimated that more than 100 million additional people risk descending into poverty between now and 2030 due to the effects of climate change. For Haiti, which is part of the countries that emit the least greenhouse gases but which experiences the most devastating impacts of this, this global crisis is making it even more difficult for us to guarantee food security, access to drinking water, and economic stability. Armed conflicts also continue to sow destruction and to ravage human lives. According to the High Commissioner of the United Nations for Refugees, the number of people forcibly displaced was 110 million in 2023. That's the highest figure that we've ever seen. Whether it be in Syria, in Ukraine, or in the Sahel region, these prolonged conflicts are exacerbating poverty, destroying vital infrastructure, and leading to massive flows of refugees. The world cannot remain inactive when millions of men, women, and children are fleeing violence in search of security and dignity. The commitment of the international community is more necessary than ever before in order to find diplomatic solutions and to promote peace initiatives. Another major challenge relates to economic inequality, which continues to get worse. According to the Human Development Report of 2023 of the UNDP, almost 1.2 billion people are still living in multidimensional poverty, namely that they lack access to essential services such as health, education, and conditions for a decent life. The COVID-19 pandemic has worsened these inequalities, pushing millions of additional people into poverty. For nations such as Haiti, this impact has been devastating. With a high level of poverty, the country is facing profound structural challenges, but these inequalities are not just a Haitian problem. They are a global problem which requires global economic reform. Moreover, the challenges linked to food insecurity have become worse in recent years. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, more than 735 million people in the world suffered from famine in 2022, an alarming increase that reflects the disruptions caused by conflicts, economic crises, and climate change. Haiti, unfortunately, is no exception to this. The World Food Programme recently underscored that almost half of the Haitian population is in a situation of acute food insecurity. This situation is not just a humanitarian emergency, but it is a threat for the stability of our nation. We must work together to strengthen our farming systems, guarantee fair access to food resources, and fight against hunger in a concerted and sustainable manner. Finally, technological progress provides new opportunities, but also new threats. The acceleration